Hey folks, as people are trickling in, I wanted to say thank you for coming to the second public engagement event for the Group 4A Technologies. Wanted to thank you for your patience as we had to reschedule this meeting. So thanks folks for attending. I think we're going to go ahead and get started as it's 3:01, give some folks time to trickle in here, but I'll go ahead and get us started. Uh, One second here to make sure the slides are in order. So I wanted to start off the meeting by giving the Public Records Act notice that this meeting is being recorded and it will be posted online for public viewing after this meeting is over. Any information provided, including in the chat or public comments that are resulting from this meeting, to the city are considered a public record and may be subject to public disclosure. And for more information, you can check out the PRA, which is a Washington state law. And again, all comments that are provided via the SurveyMonkey link, which we'll link to, will be included in the SUR, which is a public document and going to the city council. So just wanted to make folks aware of that. And the meeting is currently being recorded as well. Going over a few WebEx basics. So I think right now everyone is going to be muted by default. When we get kind of to the Q&A portion of the agenda, you can raise your hand and then unmute or use the chat to ask questions at that time. And make sure that you're wanting to select, I believe, everyone. I'm not sure what the participants see, but I know either for the panelists or the participants, make sure that you're watching who you're sending the message to, because you have the option to send private messages or to everyone. And if you're having audio issues or issues hearing, you can click the ellipsis and you can test your speaker's microphone and camera there as well. For folks who are dialing in, once the meeting starts, if you once we get to the Q&A portion, if you have a question, you can press *3 to raise your hand, and we'll be watching to see who's raising their hand. Once you've raised your hands, you will hear the prompt. You've raised your hand to ask a question. Please wait to speak until the host calls on you. We'll be watching the queue and then unmuting folks who have called in to make sure that they have their opportunity to ask their question. To hear a list of commands available during the meeting or the event, you can press star twice. And if you have your hand up and you no longer want to ask a question, or the host has already called on you and your hand is still raised, you can press *3 again to lower your hand, and then that will be confirmed again with the audio message, you have lowered your hand. Going over a few ground rules on our Surveillance Public Meeting Code of Conduct. We ask that you be respectful for diverse opinions and experiences. We have a wide variety of residents of the city who have different opinions on these technologies and their uses. We ask you to be an active listener during our presentations. We want to give a thanks to our colleagues at the Seattle Police Department for taking their time to give this presentation and provide some information about these technologies. Anyone exhibiting disruptive behavior, intimidation, or aggression may be muted, and you all are muted by default to kind of keep the pace of the meeting going. But if so, if you're unmuted and being disruptive or intimidating, you may be asked to leave the meeting and provide your comment online or by letter. And finally, please keep comments as brief as possible and related to the technologies at hand. Any question under this meeting in order to allow everyone the opportunity to speak, as we only have an hour for this meeting. We have quite a few technologies and information to get into. So I'll give us some context about the surveillance ordinance and kind of why we're here. So Seattle Municipal Code Chapter 1418 defines surveillance as technologies that observe or analyze the movements, behavior, or actions of identifiable individuals in a manner that is reasonably likely to raise concerns about civil liberties, freedom of speech or association, racial equity, or social justice. Certain technologies such as police body-worn cameras or technologies for everyday office use are exempt from the law. As we are still kind of working through this online situation, we are asking to provide comments via the SurveyMonkey. You are able to reach that link and then provide comments on all the technologies. It should be configured that you can come back if you wanted to comment on multiple technologies. You can do so just by submitting the survey a couple of times. We are also accepting mail-in comments, and there's the address on screen there. Or you can email surveillance@seattle.gov. That got left off the slideshow, but surveillance@seattle.gov is going to be where you can email comments as well for inclusion in the surveillance impact report. So a quick run of show. SPD is going to be presenting on 4 technologies currently in use. This is audio recording devices, Callyo, i2 iBase, and Maltego. And then after SPD provides our presentation, we will have time for public comment and to ask questions about the technologies. For any additional comments that may be unrelated to these surveillance technologies specifically, they may be about surveillance generally or other matters concerning policing, we ask that you please utilize the following resources in the slide, and these slide is posted online at seattle.gov/surveillance. And we ask that we provide information on finding your council district or council member, as well as opportunities to contact council or SPD directly for any follow-up questions. And now with that, I'm going to turn it over to Captain Paul McDonough from the Seattle Police Department for the overview on the Group 4A technologies. So Captain McDonough, take it away.
Omari, thank you very much. Appreciate it. For everybody that's listening in, my name is Paul McDonough. I'm a captain with the Seattle Police Department, currently assigned to the Violent Crimes and Investigative Support Section. As we go through here, we'll cover a lot of stuff, but before we get started, I just want to pass on my apologies for being unavailable last time and forcing the rescheduling of this. I apologize for everyone's inconvenience. And I do want to thank IT for putting it all back together and doing 99% of the legwork on all the documentation and information for this before we get started, because we usually go pretty long. So we'll do that. As we go through here, if it's okay, if there's not a specific question, I'll go ahead and go through each subset. All of these are recording devices. It's all data recorded for criminal investigations, etc. They're just different types, and there's 3 of them here by brand name, and then one that's individually called out as audio recording systems. With that, I'll move on from one to the next if there's no questions, and then we can answer any questions at the end also as time allows. So with that, I think, Omari, are you controlling the slides, or is Miriam? There we go. Just as a quick refresher, I gotta get rid of something off my screen here. There we go. This is the mission statement for the Seattle Police Department. Our mission is to prevent crime, enforce the law, and support quality public safety by delivering respectful, professional, dependable police services to the members of our community. Next slide. So what is audio recording? By definition here, City IT has been able to put this down for us. Audio recording devices are typically known as wires and can be concealed. That's a street name, by the way. Can be concealed either on a person or somewhere in and around the particular environment that we're working within. And these devices have to be turned on by an individual, and they only record the portions of the conversation that occur while the device is on. And these are turned on and off under 2 different categories. One is we have consent of the person. So we're doing an interview, we're talking to a witness, whatever. Hey, we're going to record this. Are you okay with that? They say yes. We then say it again, and it's recorded on tape. We've just turned it on, the date, time, etc. The other one is under authority of a warrant. So during a criminal investigation, we'll go ahead and put the facts as we know them at the time and ask a judge if it's okay if we try to record the information for the purposes of potential criminal prosecution. It can also be used to clear someone, as you know, but those are the 2 authorities under which we act. The individual involved gives their consent, or the judge gives us the consent under the rules of law, and we work under those. So next one. Again, here it's why we use it. Again, our mission is to prevent crime, enforce the law, and bring that information before the prosecutors so that they can make a determination and whether it goes before a judge. The big thing here is we're trying to make sure that we collect the best evidence. And in doing so, these are normally focused on serious and or violent criminal activity as part of the investigation. I guess there could be a time when it's a gross misdemeanor, and prosecutors often say, hey, can we get a recorded statement from the victim so that we have that for trial? So we could use them there also. The big thing here is to make sure that both sides are held accountable for their actions. Law enforcement obviously would be held accountable for what they say and do on the audio recording. And it's harder to dispute, say, oh no, they said something inappropriate, or the detective says, I didn't say that. But it's also used by the defense to say, hey, my client didn't say that, or the information presented by some other witness clearly clears my client. And so the information, when it goes to trial, is presented to both the prosecution and the defense side, and they both have access to that information going into court. In an effort to clarify a little bit, the judge determines whether there is probable cause to exist, whether they have enough information that a warrant be issued. So I don't want you to think that it's really easy to go in and get a warrant to record somebody. You really do have to have a little bit of information going into it. And the judges are our region, I believe, having worked with them for a number of years, do a really good job making sure that we have enough probable cause to believe that the crime is, or about to be committed. And this is probably the best course of action for us. Next slide, please. So how it happens is the technical electronic support unit consolidates all of these devices, and then a follow-up unit would, for the wires, would then in turn sign them out and use them under a specific case. And then that supervision falls under their case detective. The one who's working it has to approve it through their supervisor, depending on what unit they're in. And then obviously it's being reviewed by the prosecuting attorneys and then the courts later on if it gets that far. The data collected on the devices, these wires as you call them, is removed by TSU and presented to the case detective as a master case file. They make the copy, and if on some devices that it stores it on, it's deleted afterwards. So there's only the master copy, and then any copies the detective makes, either for defense, prosecution, or as a backup. But those are all stored under the rules of evidence, and those rules are set either by law or by case law, meaning the judge has said you can't do that ever again, and everyone else has to follow suit. So I do want to say that TSU does not keep any copies of the recordings that they transition from one device to the next or into the final copy. So I thought that was pretty interesting to make sure that we said that. I think I did not say that last time. I think we're ready for the next one. So there's legal standards, as we talked about earlier, and these legal standards can be checked under Chapter 973 of the Revised Code of Washington, or RCW. Those situations where we use it are stipulated by consent, as I said, or court order. And a court order is the rule of law for the nation and obviously our state. And so the state of Washington has a number of protections that other states don't have, and our judges know what those are, and then we have to meet that standard to be able to get that. And oftentimes judges can limit the amount of time, the dates, those kind of things on which it's deployed. All of them are documented there, as it states, by the technical electronic support unit. And then SPD has a number of protections inside there that assist. And one of them is the Office of Inspector General. That's a separate office from the police department created by the city council. They have the authority to inspect any and all systems and operations within the SPD. And they can find violations and or audit the systems that they see fit. In that, we also have a couple other things. I did mention the supervisor of the detectives that would use these. Another one we have is what's called the Seattle Police Department Audit and Procedures section. They go through and do periodic audits on different things. OIG is obviously the biggest one. They do audits when and where they see fit and how they want to do that.
Captain McDonough, seems like we lost you there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry.
Yep, there you go. You just cut out for a moment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, my connection's not the best. I apologize. Office of Police Accountability has the ability to look at policy violations if someone actually violated our policies and hold them accountable. In the event they determine that they believe they committed a violation of law, then they would refer that out for criminal investigation. So, all right, next slide. No, we have one more. Oh, these are all the policies. So without going through all of these are just some of the policies. Oh, next one, go back one, please. Sorry. There we go. This is just a listing of all the policies that impact this particular technology and how we use it, where we use it. And that's all referenced. All of that is available for you online. So with that, I will check with anyone. Any quick questions there?
Yeah, Captain McDonough, we're gonna roll through the slides.
Okay.
So folks, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, or we're gonna answer them after we run through.
Okay.
Yep.
My bad, I apologize.
No worries.
Okay, next slide. We're gonna go ahead and go on to Callyo, I believe. Yep, so Callyo is nothing more than a telephone identification, masking, and recording technology. We use these for criminal investigations. A lot of our undercover officers use these. Obviously, it's not good when the phone comes back and says, "Hey, Seattle Police, and we're investigating a murder for hire," and they say, "Yeah, I prefer not to talk to you." Callyo is a system that has to be placed on the individual phone that's being in use, and then it can disguise the identity by masking that cell number, but it still works on the same cell phone. It also allows you to record conversations. And the last one here is it allows you to GPS locate identifiable individuals. That is a misnomer. It only tracks the phone that we put Callyo on. It can't go into someone else's phone, like the suspect, and access their GIS information remotely through the phone. It does not have that capability. This is a GPS location that in the event we had a cooperating witness or somebody like that was working with us, agreed to do all this, and we ended up getting both consent and or a warrant, whatever's required, we could track that phone that we put it on, but we can't track the suspects or the person that we're calling, again, without their consent. So next slide. Why do we use this? Again, it's for criminal investigations, mainly undercover operations, and trying to make sure that we get the information necessary to set up whatever the operation is. If you're buying drugs, unfortunately, setting up the transition of human trafficking, that kind of thing. The high-risk can't talk today. The high-risk victims unit uses it to mask the phones of numbers, but doesn't utilize the recording features. And they can give a phone to a high-risk victim and be able to mask when they call some of the people that might be trafficking, etc. Again, this is the best way to get the best evidence. And once that evidence is retained, as I stated earlier, under the data collection part, it follows all the rules of law, the rules of evidence to be able to allowable, admissible in a court of law, and SPD policies for storage and access of that information. So again, we do these for the serious and violent criminal activity. And I'm not quite sure how else to say that, but I think that's probably the shortest way. The next slide, I think, had something to do with the data, which I just talked about. Again, it collects the information and it can GIS locate the phone that is making the phone call or receiving the call, the people working with the police or the police themselves. We can't do anybody else's. Again, TSU provides the information to the case detective for inclusion in the file, and it's stored within the guidelines set out by law or by case law. So to be able to get this, the undercover officers have to make a case through their chain of command. That's approved, goes to TSU. TSU will put it onto the phone. We document that. There's a log for that. And then, again, the legal authority that was issued under that, and then the case number of the case. So in terms of that, that's how Callyo is used. I'm not quite sure under the last presentation if there were additional questions on this one, so I'll just move on. The protections, Washington State has good protection laws for recording conversations. Again, they're under 973 RCW, and look there. I already talked about stipulation by consent and or a court order, which provides the legal authority and the allowability to use the information in court. Those are really strict, and I guess as a quick example, If we don't follow the rule of consent and or court authority, then we literally cannot use it as evidence and it has to be destroyed. And then there's other civil ramifications that the subjects can apply for. So it's really not in our best interest to violate either one of these. And then I already said this earlier, I apologize, I guess I jumped ahead, that they're documented by TSUM and subject to audit by the same units that I mentioned earlier. Audit procedures, Office of Inspector General, OPA, and then of course the supervisor makes sure that their people follow the policies. So we'll go on to the next slide. Again, these policies, many of them are the same from the earlier slide, but these are the ones that the officers have to be aware of and making sure that they follow these policies. Next slide, please. There we go. Excuse me. So we use a software program called iBase, and for us, it is nothing more than a visualization tool of data that we already own. And the data that we already own is in the criminal justice system that we follow. CJIS is a federal standard. It's only allowable to law enforcement personnel gained after arrest or investigation. And the iBase program allows us to take all these different pieces of information and see where there may be connectivity between different pieces of information, such as a vehicle and a subject, or a location, et cetera, or how many times the locations come up, and have I ever been there. The quick way to say it, and I really like the way that IT did this, is it's basically a virtual pinboard, where before we used to take all the information, write it on a Post-it, stick it on a board, and then draw lines, or in this case, rubber bands between the two to show connectivity, to help visualize for the investigators the connection between potential suspects, witnesses, victims, locations, things like that. So the big thing to remember with this technology is it's only checking our own databases, the ones that we already control. So that is, it's not going out onto the big web and taking any information or doing anything like that. Next slide will explain who uses it. Analysts that are creations, and by doing the assistance of it is oftentimes witnesses can get a vehicle description or a plate or the name of the subject. Oh, it's McDonough, and can we run that and see if he's ever been handled in the system? These analysts can do that, and then they can also say, yep, we got a felony assault with a firearm, so where does he hang out, where has he been seen before, and they try to visualize that, and then maybe who's hanging out with me. As the next one says, it just gives you a better understanding of what's happening within your investigation. And we used to do it on the pen board, but we do it online now because it's much more efficient. So next one. So as I said earlier, these are our systems that we're checking. So there are SPD records, things that we have legal access to. And then of course the CAD system. If someone called in their plate in an earlier crime, they might be able to pull it up from there and be able to say, well, 2 months ago it was used in a shooting here, and you have it now with McDonough, and he just did a shooting down here. So do we need to see if maybe he had some connection with that one up there? Again, trying to enforce the law and make sure that we hold those criminally responsible, take them to court, and let the court determine what they're going to do. We can add additional information that we've collected during an investigative course and put it into the visualization of the information that we already have. So it just allows them to basically write on a Post-it and stick it on the board too. Next one. So it can only be accessed by authorized users, and quite honestly, I have one detective in here that's IT savvy, and he's able to access it. But quite honestly, the only two that really access it are my two analysts, and they're the ones that bring everything in. It is logged, so their activities is logged in the system itself, so that when the OIG, OPA, audit and procedures, we can go back and say, hey, who accessed Paul McDonough? Oh, what was the crime, or what was the reason? And CJIS requires that you have criminal investigation, consent of the individual, required background checks type of stuff. So if you don't fit within the categories, then we can audit that and then hold those individuals accountable. Again, it says it. So there's some require other on and off. Oh, there's also changes there, so sorry about that. The next one should be the legal protections, if I'm not mistaken. There we go. So those again are the policies, and you see these are redundant, but it's important to point out that whether you use an iBase or Callyo or whatever else, you're still held accountable for a number of different policies within an SPD. And then, of course, if you abuse the technology, you're subject to criminal investigation and or losing your case because the court won't accept the evidence. So there's a lot of reasons to do it right here, and I think we do a great job with that. My analysts work really, really hard to make sure that we're not passing on negative information. So the next slide should be, I believe it's Maltego. There we go. Oh, okay. So Maltego is currently used to find publicly available information. It's just think of it as a Google search. And I have one investigator that's allowed to use this one. And it just queries public things. It's the same thing that you could find on the web if you were so inclined to do a search like that. So the difference here is it can display in a diagram showing the link. So it's a little bit like Maltego, or not, excuse me, iBase, but it's all publicly accessible information, and all of that is allowable under law. So we're careful that we use it for investigative purposes only and doing general inquiries for that. So next slide. To be honest, we mostly use it just in cyber investigations. We have cyber investigative capability, and obviously everyone knows that cyber crimes are growing tremendously. And it helps steer the detective into the right direction, I guess is the best way to say that. So, but what we use it for the most is investigating breaches or instances of cyber attack or direct cyber crime such as fraud, etc., things like that. Excuse me. So basically what it does is it just shows the connection or potential connection between individual devices and networks that we wouldn't be able to do. Now we could do an individual search really slow and take time to do that. This just speeds it up a little bit. So again, right now it's only, well, we're only using it mainly for cyber crimes. I guess you could use it for others, but quite honestly, some of the other systems are just as good at that. So next one. So again, it's publicly accessible data. So all of that you could get. And when we take that, it either goes into the case file or it's destroyed. We don't keep the information because we have no use for it if it's not relevant to the investigation of which we're looking at. Oftentimes with cyber crimes, a number of them get referred to the federal government because they initiate from outside the United States. But sometimes it's nice to know that early on and see if they can assist us in some of our enforcement efforts to protect people online. The bottom here just says it determines, hopefully, the digital origin of attacks. And again, those of you that are pretty cyber savvy, you know that that's often difficult to do. But again, it gives us a starting point to determine possible options to move. Next slide. Am I not there anymore? Can anybody hear me? Oh, there we go. Okay, just making sure. So our use is, as I stated earlier, related to a security incident or pertinent criminal investigation. And that's pretty much it. I have 2 detectives. Unfortunately, one really doesn't do it anymore. They're not working for me right now. So That's pretty much it. The intelligence ordinance, what information we can and can't collect of political, religious, or sexual orientation information. 28 CFR is the overall national standard for collecting information. And then CGIS requirements obviously are specifically to law enforcement, and information that we gain through a criminal investigation can't be used outside that investigation. Is a paraphrased down version of it, but it's all available. And the next slide should show, there we go, all the issues there. And again, I'm saying it again, but these are all very, very similar, because all of these devices are talking about data and capturing data, whether it's an audio, voice, or something from the internet, it's all data in the end. And so a lot of this falls under the same policies, etc. So next one should be open. Yes. So I will turn this over to either Omari or Miriam to manage the Q&A, if that's all right.
Yeah, so thank you, Captain McDonough, for your presentation. As the screen says, and for those who are calling in, we are now entering the kind of the Q&A public comment portion of the agenda. So please use the raised hand feature, and we will call on folks one at a time for questions. And then the chat also as well. We have some folks from able to potentially answer questions in the chat if you are unable to unmute. So I'll go ahead and start unmuting folks who are raising their hands. So I think Ferris Peel, you're up first.
Hi, I was wondering if you could tell me what kinds of publicly available information are analyzed using Maltego, and specifically if SPD analyzes social media data using Maltego.
To be honest, the social media, I don't believe we're using it for that, because what we're really looking for is networks and domains that are publicly accessible or registered online. And so that's the kind of information that we get from Maltego on that one. But again, yeah, I just want to pass on real quick, sorry for the late interruption. It's all based on either a cyber incident or a criminal investigation. So that's, we have to do that. So I just want to make sure I put that in there. I didn't do it earlier.
Okay, I think Cynthia, you're up next. Cynthia, can you hear us? It looks like you should be unmuted. Or actually, you should be unmuted now.
There you go. People finally got me unmuted.
Yeah.
So my question is information from data brokers such as CoreLogic, Experian, LexisNexis, or other companies incorporated into SPD's iBase system?
Actually, I'll have to get back to you on that one. I know that iBase does all the information that we have legal access to. So depending upon the program that you talked about, we might be able to, but I don't think so. I'm gonna come back to that in just a second. I'm gonna see if I can get an answer in the meantime. Okay, so I'll be texting real quick. But is there another question that we can do in the meantime?
Yep. So Cynthia, looks like I will mute you back to move on, but we'll follow up on that question if Captain McDonough has an answer within the session. Do you have other questions, or is that kind of just one right now?
I have more questions, but I should be able to be rotated with others so that everyone has a chance.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so we'll rotate. Up next is Nicole, and you should be unmuted now.
Also, we'll have multiple questions, so I can rotate my questions with others. I wanted to go back to Maltego. I think there was some notes on the Maltego site that they provide inferences of the relative relatedness between network data. I was wondering how that's displayed, how that's interpreted by the TESU detectives, and what sort of understanding or training do these detectives have in interpreting those inferences, if that's the case?
Well, yeah, I can cut to the quick on that one. An inference would be checked out by the detective if it's not relevant, or if it's, oh, we think, they don't use it.
I'm not sure if folks are muting themselves or if it's someone else, but we'll keep cycling through. So I think up next is Ferris again. And yeah, you can
Sure.
definitely put those in the chat as well.
So at page 7 in the SIR, this is for iBase, it says that a portion of SPD, RMS, and CAD data is automatically imported into iBase. Can you specify why it says that it's a portion of the data, which portion is this, and how is that data selected? Thank you.
So the data that we choose to get are like such as names, date of birth, vehicle license plate, date, time, that kind of stuff. There is some data that's captured in CAD in narrative form that it's much harder to have us go and get. And the reason we want that data is those are the pieces of information that can help us track down potential people responsible for whatever the crime that's being reported.
All right, next up we have Nicole.
Oh, hi. Yeah, so I think when I press mute to allow a response, I'm unable to unmute. Yeah, so I think your note about the inferences from Maltego are interpreted by the detective. I just wondered, like, if you could explain a little bit further. Are you saying that the detectives follow up on these leads, but those inferences from the Maltego aren't necessarily have to be verified before they are passed on to as any type of evidence?
Yeah, if I followed your thought, no offense, following it
Yeah, no
over
problem.
audio without being together. Yeah, so a computer can say, hey, it kind of looks like it might be this. And the best example is you can get a plate match, but one plate is from California and one's from Oregon. But you already know that you're looking for a California plate, not an Oregon plate. So they're saying, hey, what about this one? And they wouldn't use that one because it's from Oregon. So yeah, the detectives are going to do their best to figure out, hey, hold it. This is, I guess, a loose association. And so they're going to put more weight into the verifiable information that they have, because that's going to be required for court.
Okay, and so therefore, like, the actual output from Maltego itself isn't considered evidence, but of an association, but that it has to be verified before it is
Well,
that
yeah,
association is made.
I guess what you could say, and again, I'm going to make it very, very simple, and they're not always this way, but if it says, hey, you might have been at XYZ company, then we can reach out to XYZ company and ask. If we have enough to get a warrant, we could ask for a warrant. Hey, do you have anything on Paul McDonough? But in terms of it coming back, Maltego can come back with whatever it is they want, but it's up to the detective to start sifting through that to determine the validity of it and making sure that it's relevant to the actual case. I think that's probably the best way for me to say it. A cyber tech person might say it a little bit better, but that's the best way for me to say it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, next up we have Cynthia again. Cynthia.
Hi. Does SPD have the iBase plate analysis add-on?
Not that I'm aware of. And then, Cynthia, thanks for bringing that up, because the first storm we had, someone asked about the 360 search capability. I asked my analyst about that, and they said, no, we don't even use it, because even though it's only searching our accessible databases, not anything outside on the web or anything, it comes back with, if you put in the word red, every time the word red is mentioned, it'll come back and it's just not worth it. So they do individual searches by name, date of birth, vehicle description, things like that, to try to be more specific, because that's what's required by court.
Okay, next up, I think the order is getting a little mixed up here, so I apologize. I think Ferris is up next. So Ferris, you're getting unmuted.
Hi, going back to Maltego, on page 10 of the SIR, it says that the vendor, which is Paterva/Maltego Technologies, can access past queries made by SPD and Maltego. Can you talk more about what the contract is for that technology and what access in total the vendor has to data?
Well, I can't talk too much because I didn't do the contract. I'd have to defer to IT, but I do know that they have to be what's called CJIS certified or qualified and meet that standard. And that standard is only limited access for approved personnel for a definite need. So the best need that I can come up with would be if we needed to do an audit search, they could go back to Maltego and say, hey, we need you to go in and pull, I'm making this up, queries for the last 3 days and see if, McDonough did any of these. And then that would give the authorization to Maltego for them to go in. But what's written in the contract, that I would have to defer to IT on that one.
And I can say to the point, the reference in the SIR, there's some more information in section 6 around data sharing and accuracy, as well as some of the other language relating to the CJIS security policy and section 5 about data storage, retention, and deletion. So those may provide some further context as well.
Thanks so much.
I'm going to go ahead and go to Nicole.
Oh, I was going to type out my questions. I think my hand, maybe there's a way to put my hand down, but I will say my questions. It's about Callyo. My questions are, what data is stored by Callyo on the company servers and how's that managed, such as like the phone that it was downloaded on, GIS phone numbers that were sent, are those stored by Callyo outside of SPD? And then the second is where we could find access, or where we could get access to the SPD policy on use of cloud storage, or if you had were able to describe these policies for us.
So the easy one first, the policy for cloud storage, it's listed on a number of the slides there with all the policies at the very bottom. And you'll see cloud storage or cloud evidence and the policy there. And so if you go to the website at City of Seattle, seattlepolice.gov, Seattle Police Manual, and hit that number, it'll pull that one up for you. In terms of it, my understanding is we have access to the Callyo data, and I can't really say if Callyo has it. I apologize because I don't have that, but it gives us the GIS information, but we'd only record, as far as I know, the communication, the talking that occurs on the line during that time. It'll do a date, time stamp, those kind of things, and the number called. But other than that, I don't believe it tracks any other information.
Okay, next up, we're going to have Cynthia.
Hi. So the Maltego SIR for item 6.5, it doesn't mention why SPD doesn't check the accuracy of the information. So there could be like non-unique handles that people use online, or email addresses hacked, or botnets running on compromised legitimate systems. So it can be unwise to just trust the results without validation, but the SIR doesn't mention in that specific, the question that is in that SIR posed to SPD asks them how they are validating the data, and SPD does not have an answer for why they validate the data. So I'm curious about why SPD doesn't validate the accuracy of the Maltego data.
Well, I would say that they do, in fact, validate the accuracy of the data when it's relevant to the investigation, because they're going to have to do that anyway for case. So I appreciate the fact that it looks like it's, oh, we don't do that, but the case detective would in fact do that. Maltego just brings in data, and then it's going to be up to the detective to start going through saying, yes, this seems to work. Does it work? Do I need to do more research into that? Just like a regular investigation. If I was interviewing someone on the street and they said, yeah, Bill down the street is the one that did it, and he lives in a gray house, and you go down there and you have 3 gray houses. You still have to validate that a Bill lives in one of the gray houses and matches the physical description, and then can be in the time frame of the crime. So there are steps that have to be done for basic criminal investigation that are required by law, and the judges won't accept it otherwise.
And we'll keep rotating through. Ferris, I think you're up next.
Thank you. So during the last public comment hearing, there was a brief discussion of Callyo being used to live stream audio during emergency situations, which is a use that isn't contemplated in the SIR. And so I'm wondering, and there's also mention of that being authorized through prosecutors. I'm not exactly sure what was meant by what was said, but could you clarify what that usage is and how that usage is authorized?
So I apologize, I don't exactly remember what was said last time, but yeah, we have that capability for a life safety situation. So exigent circumstances, if we end up hearing shots fired, we can activate the system that way. But again, it requires a specific detective to be able to do that and set that up. And that's the reason you would use it. Otherwise, quite honestly, if you use it outside of that and you don't have a court order or consent, the judge isn't going to let you do it anyway. So it would be useless to gather the information because you can't use it for anything.
And then next up, it looks like it's Nicole. I know you mentioned that you might have tried to lower your hand. So let me know if you want me to lower your hand for you, if you want to put those in the chat, but otherwise you're unmuted.
Yeah, I'll defer this pass. Thank you.
Okay. So it looks like Cynthia would be up next.
Yeah, so earlier also in this Q&A portion, there was discussion about Maltego and like there being a contract. There wouldn't be a contract because according to the CERT at least, SPD is using the free community version of Maltego. So there's just a generic terms of service like a EULA that you'd agree to, like SPD would agree to, and there isn't a separate contract. But on that vein, in 8.1 of the Maltego CERT, it says the software's audit log keeps a record of all the data accessed by each user. And then 8.2 says the free version of Maltego is currently used is auditable, but then 4.10 says SPD currently uses a free community version of Maltego that has no internal logging or auditing. So the CERT itself, when it's describing the auditing capabilities of Maltego, is inconsistent. And then 5.2 and 5.4 also fail to mention that there are no audit logs. And sure enough, when, because anybody with internet access and a system can install the community version of Maltego, so I can see and others have seen that the logs primarily seem to be just error logs. It's not exclusively error logs, but it is certainly not logging the queries. So I would say that the use of Maltego with the community version by SPD is not auditable. And if SPD believes it is auditable, I would like to understand what they're using instead of the Maltego logs to audit it, or if this is incorrect and the CERT should be updated.
Well, I can tell you that we're not using anything else other than Maltego for that search. And I have to apologize, I didn't write the SIRs, but my understanding is it was auditable. It's a very basic format. We get basic information back to get starting points, but I'll have to defer to IT about the information that was written in the SIR.
Yeah, I can definitely, please excuse my groggy voice today. I have no voice. I can definitely take a look at that, Cynthia, and see where we are and make sure that those sections do align with each other. It's a lengthy document, and sometimes as I'm writing, I get a little bit backwards. So I will verify that, and before this CER is finalized and sent over to council, it will certainly be addressed. Thank you for pointing it out.
Yeah, I also want to just reflect on that comment. Again, thank you, Cynthia, for pointing that out. I think there's some usage of the word auditing versus logging. I think technically those may refer to different things and different capabilities within the paid and the free version. I think I'm understanding that there is not a kind of on-prem would be the paid version of standing up Maltego instance within the city's network, and then that would provide more probably detailed or on-site logging versus the audit ability. And it may be those words are used interchangeably, but they may not be meant to. So that's, again, thank you for pointing that out, and we will look into that. Next up is Ferris, and then we're going to be going starting the closing in about a couple minutes. So if you want to add some questions to the chat, you can feel free. But Ferris, you're up.
During the last public comment hearing, there was a comment made that there's some confusion as to why Callyo is separated out from the other audio recording devices. And I also asked this question last time, but can you explain what exactly is encompassed by the audio recording devices, sir, that is separate? Like, what are the brand of those devices? What kind of devices are actually being used? And are there any other mobile applications or softwares besides for Callyo that fall under that, sir?
There's no other softwares that I'm aware of that fall under that, sir. And we provided the information to IT, and then IT puts it in the big list. So there shouldn't be any out there that I'm aware of. In terms of, I got to remember the question, Ferris, there, sorry. In terms of the devices, I can't give you the brand names because there's different ones, but anything that's a recording device that will record the audio voice of another, we do have our cell phones, right? We have body-worn cameras, which is excluded from the SIR specifically, but a detective could use a cell phone to record it. It's a recording device, and then he sends that on to the evidence. But more often than not, we had little handheld digital recorders, and I don't know the brand name. It's just, literally, it's just a digital recorder. You turn it on and off, and they can use those. In terms of anything else that's out there, I'm not aware of any. I don't believe anybody's using the old cassette deck anymore.
And Captain McDonough, I'm not sure if you can see the chat, but I'll go ahead and read Nicole's question out loud. To clarify my Callyo question, does Callyo staff have access to any data, GIS, or phone numbers used by SPD or affiliates?
Well, it's not being used by any affiliates. I know that. We keep that data to ourselves, other than the information that is put into the case file. In terms of recording the GIS, that's the only one I'm not aware of. I'm not sure that it does that, and I apologize. We can answer that question at a later date, I guess, because we're running out of time, but I didn't get a hold of one of my analysts, so I can't answer that for you right now. But the main thing is the phone number that it's called from, the phone number that it's called, and then the conversation itself. And I'm sure there's probably a time lapse in there. You had a 2-minute conversation, and then here's the recording.
Okay, so we have time for one more question. I think Ferris just went, so Cynthia, we're gonna unmute you for the last question before moving on to the closing.
Yes. So for iBase being used in conjunction with I2 Analyst Notebook, is SPD using the basic version or the premium version, which happens to include I2 Analyze?
My understanding is we're just using the basic iBase, but I can look into that one too. I didn't know that they had different levels of it there, so I apologize. My understanding is we're using the iBase, and that's it. And then from that, it just searches our internal databases that we have access to.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up. I would say in the last couple minutes here, I think Ferris and Cynthia both have your hands raised. If you would like to drop any remaining questions in the chat, I will be compiling these questions and providing them to SPD from the end of this meeting, and then they will have the questions that were posed, and well, I'll mark the ones that were not answered, as well as the recording of this meeting will be posted shortly. We're going to try to get it up this week before the end of the comment period that's closing on Friday. So I'm going to work with our comms team and try to get this uploaded this afternoon or tomorrow, but that's depending on their availability. But end of week is the goal. And I see Cynthia saying you submitted them via SurveyMonkey. So SurveyMonkey questions will be submitted to the department as well. Those will be included in the SIR as well. And those questions are also, Cynthia, as you know, provided to the working group to do their assessment as well. And I know that there's a lot of overlap between some of those questions as well. So to kind of close out here, So what's next? We have the survey again. I posted the link in the chat for the Group 4A's technology survey, which is the Survey Monkey that you can use. And also there should be a space in that survey to submit some of these additional questions. So if you want to include them in the Survey Monkey as well, those will also get to the department. And comments and questions collected actually will be included in the surveillance impact report that is going to be submitted to the Surveillance Advisory Working Group, and then it will be submitted to City Council, specifically the Transportation and Utilities Committee, where they'll have hearings, and then it will be taken to full council for a vote. And then you can also leave comments. You visit more information on the Tech Talk blog, which is available at seattle.gov/tech. And then just as an update onto the next set of proceedings, we will be moving on to the Group 4B technologies later this summer. We'll be having another round of public engagement on the final retroactive technology reviews. We're going to have a very similar format where we have the presentation and opportunity to ask questions. We're working with the departments and the working group to finalize a timeline for when that is, but through all of our channels, we will be letting you know when the public engagement period for 4B opens, and then as well as when these SIRs, we have a rough timeline of December of when this current set of SIRs will be submitted to City Council. They're going to go to the working group first. In a couple of weeks, they're going to write their assessment up, and then that package will be bundled and sent to City Council. So again, in the meantime, if you have any questions, you can email surveillance@seattle.gov, privacy@seattle.gov, or use the links in the presentation to reach out to SPD or your City Council member. So with that, I think we're going to go ahead and close out our public engagement event. Like I said, we will try to get this reporting up as soon as possible. Thank you for attending, members of the public, working group members, city staff, and thank you to my colleagues at SPD for attending. So with that, I wish you all a great afternoon, and thanks.
Thank you, Omar.